Well, Mr. Young, last year, New Zealand's exports to China were worth more than 20 billion New Zealand dollars, I believe. And the New Zealand government has set an ambitious targets of doubling its exports to China by value within the next 10 years. So how can this goal be achieved?
Yeah, so I think the trading relationship and the economic relationship between New Zealand and China is one of those huge success stories. So two-way trade last year was something like 38 billion, which for some large countries perhaps won't seem like a lot, but for a small country like New Zealand, that's a really sizable proportion of our trade. And the new government that we have here in New Zealand, the coalition government, have set that target of doubling exports to the world over the next 10 years with the value of those exports. And of course, China as New Zealand's number one trade partner, taking well over a quarter of all New Zealand exports is a key component of achieving that goal. So I think there's a few different areas. Firstly, the services area. And there has been some discussion between New Zealand and China of upgrading the free trade agreement to liberalize the services component of that agreement. And I think that would be very encouraging for services industries, particularly some new areas like gaming or healthcare. And I think that could be very valuable. And then in terms of the goods trade between New Zealand and China, New Zealand exports a lot of raw commodities to the Chinese market. But at the same time, there's a lot of value-added products which are enjoyed by Chinese consumers. And so I think a focus on exporting more value-added products to the Chinese market could ensure long-term sustainable growth in that relationship.
Well, Mr. Yang, let's talk a little bit about climate action. So both China and New Zealand have set targets for reducing carbon emission. So how can they cooperate in this field to achieve their goals?
Yeah, so I think this is a really important area, not just for New Zealand and China, but for the world more broadly, because it's one of those areas where it's that classic collective action problem. It's that we all in the same earth and we all require each other to cooperate in order to achieve a collective goal. And that collective goal is to ensure that climate change doesn't have too much of a detrimental impact on our societies and the planet, and that we can work together to create a more sustainable economy and way of life. So I think in terms of New Zealand and China, the areas of complementarity are great. And there's that willingness to work together. So New Zealand has a very large agricultural sector as a proportion of our economy, but also has had to face up to and is currently facing up to some of the impacts of that agricultural system on climate change. And so there's a lot of work and a lot of research going into trying to create a more sustainable, less polluting agricultural system, which I think would be very useful for a country like China, which also has has an even larger, for example, dairy industry than New Zealand. And then, of course, for China, China is world leading in renewable energy, especially solar panels and electric vehicles, creating the hardware of renewable energy transition in a way that New Zealand is not, because we don't have that type of manufacturing capability. So just at that very basic level, there's clear opportunities for New Zealand and China to work together to share knowledge and systems in a very complementary way.